Good morning, students. How are you all? And good morning, family, teachers sitting in the gallery. Welcome to the Junior Indigenous Youth Parliament. My name is Marjorie Elworthy. I am the First Peoples Liaison Officer at Queensland Parliament. I am originally from Bardo Island in the Torres Strait. My bloodlines go to Argan, on Bardo Island, Kubin, Mapun, Arakun, around the top end there. Before we begin this event, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this event is taking place today. I respect all elders and acknowledge them because they are the keepers of the knowledge keepers, and acknowledge Sorry Business and Community as well. I hope you enjoy today's event and take care. I'll hand over to Rebecca now, and she'll do the parliamentary etiquette details. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you. Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to the Cairns Junior Indigenous Youth Parliament. My name's Rebecca and I'm going to be here helping you today. It's a very exciting day. Is anybody nervous? Is anybody not nervous? Oh, excellent. One? Only one. Oh, two, three. So good. So all you nervous ones, you look at the ones that aren't nervous and see how they do it, hey? We'll see how they go. So today you're going to be speaking into a microphone a bit like I am now, but different microphones, okay? So I'm just going to show you where they are to start off with. So if you are the Premier, can you stand up? Where's the Premier? Oh, so you're going to stand here and do your speech at this box. Okay, so you speak into that microphone. Also the Leader of the House. At the end, you can do your speech here as well, okay? And the Leader of the Opposition, where are you? So you'll stand here to do your speech, okay? So very special to get to stand in that spot. And then when you're ready, you can go and sit there, okay? Now, everybody else, if you're sitting on this side of the room, then you can use this lectern, okay? And if you're sitting on this side of the room, you can use this lectern. Now the microphones are pretty good, all right, but just try and put it underneath your mouth, but not too close because otherwise you'll be too loud, all right? And just, we want it to be so everybody can hear you, so don't be embarrassed, all right? It's going to be good. Here behind the lecterns, we've got some little step stools, all right? You see that? Do you know how heavy I am? I'm not going to tell you, it's a lot, but you'll be safe to stand up on these. So if you're a short person and you think you need a bit of height to be seen, you should stand up on the little ledge, okay? But if you're a tall person and you think you can easily see over the top of the lectern, you can just move that to the side when you come up to talk, okay? So you just kick it with your foot, get it in the right place, get comfortable, and then you can start talking. That's all making sense so far? Any questions yet? No. Okay. All right, so today we're going to do a couple of different motions. So the people who will be talking in the sport motion, who's talking about footy today in the first motion? Can you put your hand up? Yeah? Actually, can you stand up if you're talking about footy? I want to see you. So the first motion is the government motion. Yeah, everybody standing up if you're talking about it. Okay, so this is the government side. Okay, so you guys will be for the motion, you'll be agreeing with the motion, yeah? And this is the opposition side. Am I saying the right thing? It's a government motion, right? Yeah, so this is the opposition. So they are against the motion, okay? So you'll be one of the first lot to speak, so sit down. The Premier and the Leader of the Opposition, of course, will speak before the football motion. All right, so we'll go through that. And then after that one, then we're going to we'll be up to page 12 by then, private member statements. So that will be the youth members for Patton, Collins, Williams Weir, Dixon, Nuniapan and Kerr. Are you all here? If you want to stand up if I just called your member name. Yeah? So you will all speak before morning tea. So if you're not one of those people, it means you don't have to speak for ages and you get to eat first, so you can relax. All right? Now, we're really lucky today that we're joined by a couple of really special people. So first of all, we've got two members, actual members of Parliament that are going to come here and act as Speaker. So they'll have lots of experience of doing what you're doing today in the real Parliament House. And they've actually been here this week. Have you seen them on telly or anything? So they've been here this week, sitting in the actual chairs that you're sitting in. So you're in the real parliamentary chamber. So we've got Melissa McMahon, who's a member for McAllister. She's going to be here first. And so we're going to call her Madam Speaker when we speak to her, okay? So Madam rhymes with Adam, all right? Madam Speaker. So when you start your speech, if it's a lady in the chair, you'll be saying, "Thank you, Madam Speaker." All right? Now, a bit later on, we'll have another member called James Martin, and he's a member for Stretton. So these are both seats down in Brisbane. You'll call him Mr. Speaker. All right? Now, can we all together say, "Good morning, Madam Speaker"? 1, 2, 3. Very good. All right. Now, Parliament is actually quite a loud place sometimes. So sometimes the members, if they hear a speech that they really like, you're not allowed to clap in Parliament if you like something. So what you have to say is, "Hear, hear." Have you ever heard that before? All right. So we're going to have a practice. You say 1, 2, 3. Hear, hear. Oh, a bit louder with enthusiasm. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, if it's a really good idea, then you like what they say and you want to support someone, then you can say that at the end of their speech, okay? All right, I think that's everything I had to tell you. Oh, yes, no, there's another thing. If you miss your speech, so if the Speaker calls you, they're not going to call you by your real name, they're going to call you by your member name. So if you miss it, can you make sure you tell someone? And we'll make sure that you get a chance to speak, all right? So you can tell me, you can tell Marjorie, you can tell Kate over there in the black, or you can tell Maria, who's over here. So just, give us a wave and if you think something's going wrong, and we'll just come around and talk to you, okay? So we're going to try and keep it pretty relaxed. All right, now, I also want to introduce you to, I forgot something else that's really, really important. We have a very, very special visitor. So as well as our two members of Parliament who will be acting as speakers, before morning tea, we're actually going to have a visitor from the Governor of Queensland. So the Governor of Queensland, her name is Her Excellency Dr. Jeanette Young. Okay, so, and we can call her Your Excellency. Do you want to try that one out? Can you say, "Good morning, Your Excellency"? Good morning, Your Excellency. So when we go out, you'll get to meet her. So she is actually the representative of the King in the Queensland Parliament. Okay, so she's a very, very important person. She wants to come and meet with you today. So you get a chance to meet her and talk to her and ask her any questions about her job. She's just recently been to the King's coronation that was on last weekend. So she's just come back from that trip. So you might have some questions you want to ask about that if you were one of those people that watched it on TV. Okay, I think we're nearly ready to start. I'm going to ask Quentin from the Electoral Commission to come down. If he's here. This is Quentin. He works for the Electoral Commission and he wants to talk to you just a little bit about himself, what his job is, and a little bit about voting. So I'm just going to hand over to him for a few minutes. Thanks, Quentin.
Good morning, boys and girls. How are you all? That's good. Congratulations on being selected to come and partake in today's Youth Parliament. My name's Quentin Barber. I'm a proud descendant of the Boigu Island and the Coodjamal people of Shoalwater Bay. My role at the Electoral Commission is the First Nations Engagement Officer. Prior to that, I was a police officer for 25 years and I've just recently taken up this new role. So the Electoral Commission, what do the Electoral Commission do? So does everybody here know how each and every one of the 93 members of Parliament take up their seats? Is it through a vote, would you say? Yeah? So what happens is the Electoral Commission, we are the umpires or the referees for the voting process. Okay, so what happens is people put their hands up as they want to be delegates and they want to take up these roles. So that has to go to the vote to the people, and that vote has to have a referee or an umpire, just like a game of sport. Football always has a referee. Okay, so what we do is make sure that everybody plays nice, everybody plays by the rules, and then at the end of the day, we count up the votes and find out who gets elected and who gets to sit in that seat. Alrighty-o. So the Electoral Commission has been around since 1992. Okay, it's an independent body, and what we are responsible for is setting up polling booths. So I don't know if any of you have gone with mum and dad to the school or wherever it may be, community hall, and whilst they voted. And so that we are the people that are responsible for that. We hire all the staff that run the polling booths, and then at the end of the day, once everybody's had a vote, we are the ones who then tally up the votes. We count the votes and then we announce who the winner is. Okay, so it's a big, long process, and these are very important seats, so we have to make sure that everything is done correctly and that there are rules that everybody must abide by, and we also make sure that those rules are adhered to by each and every one of the candidates. Rightio. So I think with the Electoral Commission, okay, we look after state and local government, and the Australian Electoral Commission, they look after federal government. All right, so everybody that's here, from the Speaker of the House right through to all the other members, the Premier, is all are elected through a vote. All right. So yeah, so we pretty much the vote comes around I think it's every 4 years. All right. So between that time, we are preparing, and we also look after by-elections and local and state elections. We also look after industrial elections as well. All right. So we're pretty much the first point of call, first process for people to take up their positions. And that's probably it for any questions from anybody about the Electoral Commission. No, very good. Thank you, boys and girls. I hope you have a great day. Thank you, Margaret.
Okay, youth members, are you nearly ready to get started? Are you nearly ready? Excited? Can you all put your speech down and stand up? Can you all reach your hands all the way to the roof? Now, can you put this one down? Now put this one down. Now this one. Now this one. Now this one. Now this one. Hands on your hips. Hands on your toes. And up to the sky. And hands on your heads. And big breath in. And big breath out. Now let's have a wiggle. Okay, now we're good. All right, sit down. What's going to happen now is we're going to ring the bells, because that's how the members know to come into Parliament. Now, you members are all very good and you're here early, but we're going to ring the bells, and when the bells stop ringing, the Sergeant-at-Arms is going to bring the Speaker in. So when I give you the signal, you'll all have to stand up. So it's a bit like assembly maybe when the principal comes in. You'll have to stand up and be quiet to show respect to the Speaker, and then she will tell you when it's time to sit down. Okay? All good? All right, let's get going. Do you want to ring the bells? Let's do it.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Honourable members, I respectfully acknowledge that we are sitting today on the Aboriginal land of Aboriginal people and pay my respects to elders past and present. I thank them as First Australians for their careful custodianship of the land over countless generations. We are fortunate in this country to have two of the world's oldest continuing living cultures in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, whose lands, winds and waters we all now share. Good morning, Youth Indigenous Parliament. I am very pleased to be here. I've been very pleased to be here in Cairns all week and to be able to participate this morning. And it's great to see so many young people putting their hand up, and I look forward to hearing a lot of fantastic speeches this morning. This morning we came in with the Sergeant-at-Arms who carried the big gold mace, obviously not the real one. The real one that we have in Brisbane is a gold mace encrusted with a number of jewels. We didn't bring that one for the Youth Parliament. Also, you will notice on the table, next to the mace, which for the first time happened in Parliament here in Cairns, is a broken tip spear. It was presented to the Honourable Member for Barron River, Craig Crawford, and it has sat alongside the mace for this particular sitting week here in Cairns as an act of reconciliation, specifically because this week here in Cairns in the Parliament we passed the Path to Treaty Bill. This is an extremely momentous occasion, and I think going forward you can all be able to tell the story of when Parliament came to Cairns and passed the Path to Treaty Bill, because this hopefully begins a new chapter in Queensland's history, and you can all say that you were here for it. Now, we have some amazing work to get through this morning. I understand you've all got some speeches, and we've got an interesting debate around sport to come up. Everyone excited? Yeah, sport's my jam, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you've all got to say. Right, everyone got their speeches in front of them and ready to go? Excellent. Right, so the first person... Yep. The first person I'm going to call is the Youth Premier. Hear, hear. Come on, where's the government members? Support your Youth Premier. Hear, hear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Youth Premier, it is an honour to be here today to share my vision for the state of Queensland with a special focus in education. We all know that education is the key to success, and it is the foundation of our future that can be built upon. Firstly, I strongly believe that education should be available to every child regardless of the background and location. This means that all schools must have the appropriate resources and facilities to provide a safe, nurturing environment for learning. Secondly, I believe that education should be fun. This will make students want to keep coming to school each and every day. Students should be able to follow their interests and passions by trying different programs. At our school, we are offered a world of opportunities, which include the best drama, music, art and sports programs. Thirdly, having the best technology is important. If we truly want to provide the best education for students, it will be something that we will need for our future jobs. Let's not forget about the important skill of being a good person and a good citizen, where we show respect, kindness and empathy towards others. We can do this by including kids in all opportunities. Today, students will grow up to become Queensland citizens, and perhaps some of them will become leaders. How important will it be that they have this skill? Let us work together to make this vision a reality for the sake of our children and future Queenslanders.
Hear, hear. I call the Youth Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, I would like to share with the House why more Indigenous Australians should be in Parliament. Firstly, Indigenous people have a unique perspective on issues that affect their land and community. They also have a deep understanding of our culture and traditions. They are also brilliant at bringing knowledge to the table when making decisions that affect their people. Secondly, having more Indigenous in Parliament will improve education and teach future First Nations about our voice and who we are. Having this education, it will not only improve our knowledge on where we have come from, but also dramatically reduce crime rates with First Nations people. It will also close the gap with health between First Nations and Anglo-Saxons, improving life expectancy of First Nations people. First Nations should all have a voice because before the Europeans came to Australia, this was their land and they were the custodians of this land. Having more Indigenous Australian people in Parliament will ensure that all voices are heard. Finally, our First Nations people have a culture and language that are precious to this nation, having interests in vast tracts of our country. The Commonwealth needs constitutional power to protect and advance these interests. The Queensland Parliament has a dismal amount of 11 First Nation parliamentarians, which is a mere 5% of the total number of elected state politicians in Queensland. This is important that we have diverse voices in the Parliament to make sure that all people are represented and that we have a range perspective on issues that affect all of us. With this change, it is an important step to ensure that Indigenous voices are heard. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Hear, hear. Very good. Now we're about to move into our government motion. Now just a tip for all players, if you have prepared a speech, you can look at your speech notes throughout. A lot of us parliamentarians do that. You guys put a lot of effort into writing a good speech, and I'd hate for you to forget or miss anything. So if you are giving a speech today, you can look at your notes. All right, I call the youth member for sport.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. Being such a large state, sporting talents are emerging from as far north as the Torres Straits.
Wait up, youth member. You have a motion that you would like to move?
Yes.
Sorry, just wait on. We'll get some help.
Madam Speaker, I move this House support that reason 1. All Year 6 students from South East Queensland will attend the School Sports Carnival, competing against Far North Queensland schools to be held each year in Townsville or Cairns. Number 2. At least one State of Origin game will be played in Far North Queensland each year. Number 3. From 2025, all players in the NRLW competition will be paid the same rate as NRL players.
Here. Sorry. Yes, continue with your speech now.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. Being such a large state, sporting talents are emerging from as far north as the Torres Straits and west to Mount Isa and everywhere in between, down to metropolitan Brisbane. Sporting talents do not just come from South Queensland. It is important that as a state, we acknowledge the diverse sporting talent that Queensland has to offer. Madam Speaker, it is for these reasons I ask the House to support the following motions. Number 1, all Year 6 students from South East Queensland will attend a school sports carnival competing against Far North Queensland schools to be held each year in Townsville or Cairns. Number 2, at least one State of Origin game will be played in Far North Queensland each year. Number 3, from 2025, all players in the NRLW competition will be paid the same rate as NRL players. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call the Youth Shadow Minister for Sport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I strongly oppose the motion that all Year 6 students from South East Queensland attend a a sports carnival with other schools in far north Queensland. My main reason is that they might have a different point of view of how to play the game. Some of the kids might get too competitive and think that North Queensland teams are not being fair. Secondly, they might get homesick and miss their parents. Their parents might also get worried for the kids' safety. Lastly, I'm concerned about where they would stay if they have no family here. How would the family be able to afford transport and food and accommodation? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call the youth member for Nakata.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to inform the House that I oppose the motion of NRLW players being paid the same as NRL players. I oppose this motion as this stage as the NRLW is not making the same revenue as the NRL. This is due to the NRLW not playing as long as the NRL. They do not have their games televised as much as I believe that they are not attracting the same crowds as the NRL. I do believe that over time that all the above points will improve, which will then raise more revenue for the NRLW. Lastly, I believe this motion should be looked at again in 4 years' time to see if there can be changes made to the pay rate of NRLW players. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call the youth member for Bandler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the youth member for Bandler, I bear the name of a famous activist who became involved in the Australian peace movement and who worked hard to gain equal pay for Indigenous workers. The motion we are supporting today also involves female players in the National Rugby League women's competition being paid the same as the male players. Like Faith Bandler, I cannot stress strongly enough for the need of both male and female players to receive equal pay. Female players are just as dedicated in the way they train and play the game. They train and play for the same hours. They work in their community for the same hours. Female players in the NRLW deserve and must be paid at the same rate as male players in the NRL.
I call the youth member for Muller.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I support the Minister for Gorey's motion. I wish to speak to the idea of all Year 6 students from South East Queensland attending a school sports carnival to compete against Far North Queensland schools to be held each year in Townsville or Cairns. With so much sporting talent now emerging from the far north, the participation of all Year 6 students from South East Queensland in a school sports carnival in either Townsville or Cairns has a number of positive benefits. Number 1, Queensland is given the opportunity to showcase their homegrown talents in their own town. Number 2, Townsville and Cairns is more central for students from the Cape and Torres Strait Islands as well as out west to be able to make the trip as well, which could be more affordable than travelling further south. Madam Speaker, these are some of the reasons why I support the Minister for Sports motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call the youth member for Purcell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise on the motion of at least one State of Origin game being played in Far North Queensland. I oppose this idea because I'm concerned about how many people it will bring to Far North. I believe it would have an impact on the public transport system as well as having an impact on accommodation. I believe there needs to be more planning for this to happen. Lastly, I'm concerned about the health problem that could arise from the amount of people in the same space. For example, a high transmission of viruses. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call the youth member for Wyatt.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I am pleased to support the motion of at least one State of Origin game to be held in Far North Queensland annually. From a student's point of view, I believe it would be a good opportunity for kids to watch the clash between Queensland and New South Wales. They are some of the best rugby league players in Australia, and since children look up to these players, this will encourage more kids to want to play rugby league. The game being played in Far North Queensland will bring lots of fans, which means bringing more money into the town that the game is being held in, supporting the community's economics. Players and their families who do come to the Far North will experience the great tropics and what we have to offer, such as great weather, beautiful beaches, the Great Barrier Reef, stunning rainforests, our lagoon and esplanade, freshwater creeks, and maybe even getting to meet our local rugby league players and families. I appeal to the Parliament to consider Far North Queensland hosting an event such as this. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call the youth member for Bunny.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am honoured to represent the well-known Indigenous actor whose play was set in the Torres Strait and was first seen at the Cairns Indigenous Art Fair in 2021. Jimmy was born on the remote Mobile Island in the Torres Strait, but has worked in every Australian state. I wish to support the motion that an annual sports carnival for Year 6 students to be held in the Far North Queensland, so that students from South East Queensland can travel to this amazing part of the world. Please don't use the excuse that Far North Queensland is too far away. You could not get any further away than Jimmy Barney's home on Mobile Island, and look at the success he had in his career, in his theatre and TV career. Air travel is starting to return to normal after COVID-19, and once again, let's not use the excuse of distance to hold this sports competition in either Cairns or Townsville. Come to Far North Queensland, great one day, perfect the next.
I call the youth member for Unipingu.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to inform the House that I oppose Year 6 students from South East Queensland attending a sports carnival competing against Far North Queensland schools, which would be held in Townsville or Cairns. I'm against this idea due to the kids being too far away from home and the concerns of them maybe being injured. I believe this would be worrying for parents. I also believe this would have a huge financial impact on parents. Lastly, I would be worried about how we would be able to accommodate and transport the kids around. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call the youth member for Carmody.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I support the Minister for Grow's motion. I wish to speak to the idea that at least one State of Origin game be played in Far North Queensland each year. Given the fact that many of today's current rugby league players originate from Far North Queensland, it makes sense to give them the opportunity to proudly play the game they love in front of their local community. Having a game in Far North Queensland makes the game more accessible to far northern residents who are unable to attend games in Brisbane due to cost of travel and accommodation. People who can afford to travel from interstate and intrastate will definitely make the trip anyway. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call the youth member for O'Donoghue. Nope. Okay. I call the youth member for Plum.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I rise to speak on the motion of at least one State of Origin game to be played in Far North Queensland each year. With thousands of players junior and senior grades, Queensland has many fans of rugby league. We here in Far North Queensland host an annual rugby league game at our stadium. The State of Origin, if hosted in Far North Queensland, would be a family-friendly event like many others. Tickets would be at an affordable price with many families going along. If Far North Queensland were to host such an important event such as the State of Origin, it would not only bring many spectators, but it would be a source of revenue for the community. I believe hosting the State of Origin will bring more opportunities for more events in Far North Queensland. I insist Parliament support this event to be held in Far North Queensland annually. Thank you, Speaker.
I call the youth member for Nichols.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I inform the House that I am opposing the motion that at least one State of Origin be played in Far North Queensland each year. I am concerned about the impact it will have on traffic and on the public transport system. I am also concerned about the safety and security of the players and crowds. Lastly, I am not sure that we have enough suitable accommodation option for all the players and people travelling to watch it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call the youth member for Dodson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the youth member for Dodson, I am honoured to acknowledge Patrick Dodson, a well-known activist and politician from Western Australia. More recently, Senator Dodson has been working as one of the authors of the voice proposal, which will be the topic of the referendum later this year. I wish to support the motion that a statewide sports competition for Year 6 students can be held annually in either Cairns or Townsville. Let's face the fact that Queensland is a large state, and from what I see, the southeast corner, including Brisbane, the Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast, have the biggest share of sporting competitions. Do organisers realise the distance that we have to travel to compete in sports teams? Let's play fair. Perhaps this competition could grow as big as State of Origin and be known as the State of Fair Play competition.
I call the youth member for Mills. I call the youth member for Warramurra. The youth member for Malboy. Sorry. Go ahead.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I support the Minister for Gore's motion. I wish to speak to the idea that from 2025, all players in the NRLW competition will be paid at the same rate as the NRL players, as we see more and more NRLW games being televised. The women playing the sport of rugby league should definitely be paid at the same rate as the males in league. If you have ever watched a game, you would see that the women play just as hard, hit as hard, and show as much commitment as any other professional sporting group. Showing our support for their commitment to the sport will only encourage future generations to follow this pathway as well. These are just some of the reasons I wish to support the Minister for Sports motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call the youth member for Malboy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have listened to your promotion of sport and attempting to create a more equal playing field for all. I ask you, Madam Speaker, who is going to fund these ideas? Let's look at the participation of Year 6 students from the southeast in Townsville or Cairns. Flights alone are in the vicinity of $240 per student. Where are these monies coming from? Let's say State of Origin is held in Townsville. You may recall when the last State of Origin game was last held there in 2022. There was a dire lack of accommodation. If the city does not have adequate accommodation, then they cannot possibly host a State of Origin game. Let's say from 2025, women are paid at the same rate as men in football. Where are these funds coming from to support such a motion? It is a fact that men draw the biggest crowds at football games, therefore increasing profits per match. Without bottoms on seats, I ask you, Mr. Minister, who is covering the shortfall? Although these ideas have fair grounding, I have grave concerns around the economic costs and social pressure involved. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call the youth member for Paris.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I rise to speak on the motion of that women in the NRL competition be paid as the same rate as the men. In the NRLW competition to be paid at the same rate as the men in NRL. If you haven't seen a women's game, let me just say there is no doubt that women play just as hard as men. You will also find that many female players still hold the job and are mothers and carers as well as sports people. With NRLW currently, this has opened more opportunities for women in league with equal pay. NRLW should become a career aspiration for many. When women are paid at the same rate, this would expand the number of players, increase spectators, and increase revenue for clubs. I impose Parliament support our women in the NRL, ensure equal pay for the future of our game. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call the youth member for Fafita.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a youth member for Fafita, I bear the name of a famous Indigenous rugby player, David Fafita. I can forgive David Fafita from coming from New South Wales. I do know that he will be proud to support the motion that at least one State of Origin game will be played in North Queensland each year. It will be interesting to check the numbers of Queensland State of Origin players who were actually born in North Queensland. And I am sure that we will have our fair share when 2023 team is named soon. Imagine how proud their families would be to see them playing on home grounds in North Queensland. Cairns and Townsville can stand proudly alongside Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane. Townsville is home to North Queensland Cowboys, and Cairns may be the future home of Pacifica team if all goes to plan. I urge you to join me in the call for at least one State of Origin game to be played in the North. Thank you.
I call the youth member for Freeman.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I support the Minister for Gorrie's motion. I wish to speak to the idea of all Year 6 students from South East Queensland attend a school sport carnival to compete against Far North Queensland schools to be held each year in Townsville, Cairns. Far North Queensland has produced many outstanding sports like Rod Laver, Kathy Freeman, Greg Norman and Sam Bacco. We now have many young sport people coming up through the ranks in many sport fields. Having Year 6 students from South East Queensland attend a school sporting carnival in Far North Queensland not only encourage them to appreciate the distance between themselves and students in Far North Queensland, but also provides opportunities for students from Far North Queensland to showcase their talents. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call the youth member for Pedersen.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I am pleased to support the motion of a sports carnival to be held annually in either Townsville or Cairns for all Year 6 students from South East Queensland. Not all students across the country have the opportunity to participate in sports or sporting carnivals. This carnival would be that opportunity to try out a sport that may interest them. If the student finds a sport that they enjoy, this could potentially lead to them playing their chosen sport as a career in the future. Sports can be a great tool to be fit and active, but also to meet others and build lifelong friendships. I encourage Parliament to support this initiative for our future leaders of Australia. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call the youth member for Pemulwuy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To support the motions that all female players in the NRLW competition be paid at the same rate as the males in the NRL competition, I am going to take a step back in time. I want you to think about the year 1790 when the Aboriginal warrior Pemulwuy fought hard and died for his land and people. When the British soldiers and settlers arrived in Australia, this was a time of great change for the First Nation people of Sydney. Now let's talk about today, 2023. Paying the female football players the same rate as the male players also means a great change must take place. Pemulwuy was a strong and brave warrior who inspired others. I beg you to show the same strength and bravery, and that is why I support the change to equal pay for both female and male football players.
I call the youth member for Hatton.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I support the Minister for Gorrie's motion. I wish to speak to the idea that at least one state of origin game be played in Far North Queensland each year. This would be a boost to Far North economy, as people may not only travel to watch the game, but enjoy all that the North has to offer, such as the Great Barrier Reef and the rainforest. The weather at that time of the year is glorious, highlighting the higher quality of players would encourage Far North Queensland youngsters to aspire to that level of sport as a career. We need to remember that Maroon supporters are not just in Brisbane, but in Queensland-wide. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is the month of May, and we all know what that means, that the first state of origin game will be played. Just in case you have not put the date in your diary, the first game between New South Wales and Queensland will be played on Wednesday, 31st May in Adelaide. I know I can hear you asking, why is this game in Adelaide? But wait, to be fair, the second and third games are in Brisbane and Sydney. My point is that Far North Queensland needs to be on the list for at least one game in the series, and sooner rather than later. In 2021, Townsville hosted a State of Origin match because COVID-19 forced the game to be moved from Melbourne. So it's not like we don't know how to host an Origin game. The 2021 game was a huge success. I urge you to consider holding at least one State of Origin match in North Queensland again soon.
Is there anyone on the speaking list that I have not called? All right. The question is that the motion moved by the Youth Minister for Sport be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Sorry, I didn't quite hear you. Those of that opinion say aye. Those against, no. Who opposed the motion? Say no. I didn't hear you guys. I need voices. Those that had opinions say no? Well, I think the ayes have it. Divide? A division has been called. Ring the bells. close the bars. The question is that the motion be agreed to for which a division has been called. I'll get the government whip to advise what the government votes are for the ayes or noes.
46 ayes, Madam Speaker.
Will the opposition whip please advise what the opposition votes are for the ayes or noes?
22 noes, Speaker.
Honourable members, honourable youth members, the result of the division is ayes. What was the number again? 46 and noes 22. The division is resolved in the affirmative. Congratulations. It is now time for private members' statements. I call the youth member for Patton. Youth member for Patton.
Thank you, Madam. I rise to inform the House of an important issue facing the Yoruba community. The power goes out frequently. This is a major problem for the Yoruba community. Businesses are forced to close, which means they lose money. It also means Yoruba residents cannot access groceries, petrol, ATMs, and more. It impacts children's education because without lights, they can't participate in any learning. We live in tropical North Queensland where it is very hot with no power. There's no air conditioning, which means people can't sleep and are very uncomfortable. When the power is out for too long, the food gets spoiled. Finally, when there's no power, we don't have communication or internet, which creates many problems for the community. The people of Yoruba deserve better. The constant power outages need to stop. Thank you, Madam.
I call the youth member for Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to draw the attention of the House to acknowledge the treatment of Indigenous women at their place of work. First Nations women of Australia have always been treated different and discriminated against at their place of work, and I feel it is finally time to address it. Far too often these ladies are harassed and based off of their gender and race, which leads to our women finding it hard to go to work and no longer wanting to. Around 44% of Indigenous women report being discriminated against at their place of work, and realistically, that percentage shouldn't even be over zero. If we want to create a more suitable work environment for our First Nations women, we must be more inclusive and have respect for diversity. Thank you.
I call the youth member for Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share with the House the impact of youth crime on young people like myself. I'm going to focus on fear for personal safety because this impacts me, my family, friends and community. A place where us young people should feel safe is in shopping centres. One of my peers informed me she is too scared to look around at people in the shopping centre for fear of them getting angry and wanting to fight her. Seeing youth criminals walk out of shops with stolen goods and making sure they don't see us watching them is scary. Shopping centres should be fun and enjoyable. Many of us young people don't want to go to them anymore because we feel unsafe. Mr. Speaker, it is not fair for people, especially youth, to have to worry about personal safety in shopping centres. Youth crime affects a lot of children and young people, especially our well-being from feeling scared. We want to feel safe wherever we go. This is why we must stop youth crime. However, whatever our approach to stopping youth crime, Mr. Speaker, it should be to ensure all youth feel safe and supported. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Williams-Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share with the House the idea of Cairns hosting a First Nations Youth Festival. The First Nations Youth Festival would be open to youth attending a primary or secondary school. The school would nominate their teams of youth to showcase their culture through dance and song. For many First Nation students, this is an important opportunity to share their culture with the local community. This means that families can teach and learn about their culture and pass down traditions to the next generation. This festival will also give our community the chance to eat our traditional food. A festival will allow communities to come together in celebration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to inform the House of an important issue affecting Yoruba community. The qualities of the water and conditions are poor. The tap water is undrinkable, which is seriously impact the people in Yoruba. Drinking the water can make people sick. Short-term effects include skin and gut problems. Drinking polluted water can also lead to lifelong health problems, including damage to the kidneys, liver, bones, and brain, and even cancer and serious heart problems. Poor quality water also means that Yoruba recently cannot probably clean themselves, their children, or their properties. This can lead to diseases spreading through the community. The people of Yoruba deserve access to clean, fresh drinking water. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Uniapon.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share with the House against the use of kangaroo leather for commercial profit. The use of kangaroo leather for such things as football boots, bags, shoes and belts. It's cruel and unfair. Kangaroos do not deserve to be killed when we consider their average lifespan in the wild is 6 years. Kangaroos are also a benefit of our ecosystem. They help by minimizing bushfires because they eat the grass that can easily start bushfires. The kangaroo is an important native animal to Australia, as you'll find it on a coat of arms as part of our national emblem. Kangaroos are also a culturally significant animal to many Aboriginal people of Australia. I implore Parliament to reconsider the killing of kangaroo for leather to be used for clothing and accessories. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, thank you, members. Those were some very impressive contributions and well-researched and spoken private member statements. My name is James Martin. I'm the member for Stretton, and I look forward to presiding over the rest of this Junior Indigenous Youth Parliament. We will now break for morning tea, but first, the Sergeant at Arms. To here. Do I read out debate on opposition? Just read. I call the Youth Shadow Minister for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that this Parliament place on record its appreciation of the contribution made to our state and nation by various eminent Indigenous Australians.
I call the Youth Minister for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I would like to share with the House an important Indigenous woman named Ash Barty. She has been described as having a pro-effort on Indigenous Australian. Ash Barty was just a kid when she started playing tennis. She won 50 career single titles, including 3 Grand Slams. She was the first Australian woman to win at the Wimbledon since Evan Goolagong, and was #1 in the world for 121 weeks. Sadly, she retired from the game in 2022. She is still important, however, because she is the National Indigenous Tennis Player Ambassador and works with kids in the Indigenous community to get them into sports. In June 2022, she was made an Officer of Order of Australia for a service to tennis and youth development programs. A seat should be named for Ash Barty because she is a significant role model for Indigenous Australian. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Shadow Minister for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that this House on record its appreciation of the contribution made in our state and nation by various Aboriginal Indigenous Australians. Today I would like to share the House of the story of Philippa Moseby. Has anything ever been stolen from you? Well, Mayor Moseby has been working tirelessly to get cultural artefacts that were once taken away and brought back to the rightful home. Strengthening our island identity is Mayor Moseby's vision. He has spent decades proving cultural practice, dances, and traditional language. He also speaks up against climate change, global warming, and the threat to pose the island homes. I strongly believe that the House will support the motion to recognise the ongoing contribution of Philippa Moseby to our state and nation.
I call the Youth Member for Mau.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that this House place on record its appreciation of the contribution made to our state and the nation by Mau Power. Patrick James Mau, known as Mau Power, is an Indigenous hip-hop artist from Thursday Island in the Torres Strait. Mau has toured both within Australia and overseas and has worked with other famous Indigenous musicians such as Archie Rage and Christian Anu. In 2018, he was invited to join Christian Anu as part of the opening ceremony at the Commonwealth Games on the Gold Coast. In the remark of the famous song My Island Home, Mau openly shows the pride he has for his Thursday Island home. The film clip of the song is really a personal message of the love that he has for the Torres Strait. As Queenslanders, we thank him for using his hip-hop art to let the world know how special this part of Queensland is. Thank you.
I call the Youth Member for Anu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share with the House of the rising sea levels in the Torres Strait. Firstly, on the behalf of St. Teresa's, I would like to acknowledge the Gimwe, Wallabara, Yidinji peoples as the traditional owners of this land, and acknowledge our First Nations peoples of the Torres Strait Islands here today. Climate change is affecting our islands, and our people are in danger of being displaced. The burning of coal, oil, and gas are threatening our coasts and forcing us to move further inland than ever before. Slowly, we will have no island home. My people have contributed the least to this national and world problem and are vulnerable with little to no resources to cope with such a disaster or devastating effects, and yet are impacted the most by the reality of this. It had to take a group of Torres Strait elders only in recent years to voice their concerns to the United Nations for failing to take climate change serious in the Torres Strait before the matter was properly addressed by governments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the member for Tapsell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to support the motion that the House records its appreciation of imminent Indigenous Australians. Miranda Tapsell is a proud Larrakia Tiwi actress who was born in Darwin in 1987, growing up in West Arnhem Land. At the age of 16, she won the Bell Shakespeare Company Regional Performance Scholarship. This encouraged her to move to Sydney to study at the National Institute of Dramatic Art, NIDA, when Miranda graduated in 2008. Tapsell started performing from the age of 7 in a wide variety of genres, including stage, television, and cinema. One of her most popular roles was Cynthia in the movie The Sapphires. In 2015, she received 2 Logie Awards, winning for the Best New Talent and Most Outstanding Newcomer. Over the next few years, Miranda's acting became more recognised. In recent times, she starred in the movie That's Dry, alongside Australian actor Eric Bana. As her career continued to develop, Miranda Tapsell is now an author and a producer. She is clearly an eminent Indigenous Australian who has contributed to our state and nation. In Miranda's words, "You can push yourself to do things you never dreamed you would." Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the member for Goods.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with the House my speech on Adam Goodes. Adam Goodes is an Australian rules football legend and a powerful voice for Indigenous rights. Goodes is not just a remarkable athlete, but also a cultural icon who has used his platform to raise awareness about Indigenous issues and promote social justice. Goodes has been a vocal advocate for Indigenous rights, using his platform to speak out against racism and discrimination in sport and society. He has inspired many to stand up for what is right and to fight for a more inclusive and just society. Goodes has also been a role model for Indigenous youth, showing them that they can succeed and achieve their dreams despite the challenges they face. He has used his success to empower and inspire the next generation of Indigenous leaders. Goodes' legacy will continue to inspire and educate us all. His courage, resilience, and leadership have left a lasting impact on Australian sport and society, and we should all strive to continue his work for a more just and inclusive Australia. So let's honour Adam Goodes and his incredible contributions to sport and Indigenous rights, and continue to fight for a better and more equitable future for all Australians. Thank you.
I call the youth member for Namatjira.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share with the House the story of Abbott Namatjira. What can you do in 8 weeks? This is about as long as most of us get for Christmas holidays. Well, 8 weeks was all it took for one of the most best Australians to learn the techniques of watercolour paintings. At 32, Abbott Namatjira was a camellia for visiting artist who, over 8 weeks, taught him how to paint landscapes. He combined many elements for traditional culture and art. In this new medium, this reflected the natural beauty of the rugged land and beautiful flora around Alice Springs. He was the first Aboriginal artist to master the Western style of art. In 1957, he and his wife became the first Aboriginal people to be recognised as citizens of Australia.
I call the youth member for Roach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share with the House the story of Archie Roach. It takes guts to stand up here today and talk about a great man, but it takes more guts to stand against the majority and be vulnerable. Archie Roach was an Australian singer, songwriter and activist. His most famous song, Took the Children Away, was based on his own life. Mr. Roach was taken from his family when he was only a toddler, but he was a victim of the stolen generation. He wrote about the pain this caused him and his family. Mother's tears were falling down. Dad shaped up and stood his ground. He said, "You touch my kids, and you fight me." And they took us from our family. Archie Roach would never see his mum again. She died when he was 15, probably from a broken heart. He was able to put his pain into song lyrics. Archie Roach died last year, but it's safe to say that his story and songs will live on forever.
I call the youth member for Deerall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share with the House the contributions of Mr. Eric Deerall to the Australian people. Eric Deerall's family lived in Cookshire for over 20,000 years. Mr. Eric Deerall was the first Aboriginal person elected to an Australian state parliament. As the National Party member for Cook from 1974 to 1977, Mr. Deerall raised issues facing Aboriginal Australians, but made it clear he was representing all members of his electorate. He advocated for improved roads, schools, and access to medical treatment. Mr. Deerall was the first chairperson of the Aboriginal Coordination Council. Mr. Deerall was deeply involved in justice issues affecting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Eric Deerall's contributions were acknowledged by Queensland Parliament convening of the first Eric Deerall Indigenous Youth Forum in June 2012. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Page.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share a story with the House, the story of Stephen Page. Our mob are known for being great storytellers, and Stephen Page is possibly one of Australia's greatest storytellers. He invented First Nation storytelling through dance. He was the artistic director of Australia's leading Indigenous dance company, Bungara, for 30 years and created over 27 amazing performances. His artworks on stage and film have been shared in sold-out shows around Australia, soaring imagination that Bungara is so successful. Today, thank you, Stephen Page, for showcasing that Aboriginal art has to play in reconciliation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Thaiday.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sam Thaiday is a proud Torres Strait Islander man who was born in Sydney and raised in Townsville. He has played 16 years for the Brisbane Broncos NRL football team. Within those 16 years, he was the Broncos captain, an Australian international player, and Queensland State of Origin representative. He was also a member of the victorious Australian 2013 Rugby League World Cup. Throughout his career, he has received numerous awards, including the Daily M Award for Second Row Forward of the Year. He was named in the Indigenous Australian Rugby League Team of the Century and has won a premier title with the Brisbane Broncos. Sam Thadde's biggest achievement was that he was given the Ken Stephan Award for his tireless effort to close the gap in the Indigenous health and youth issues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I would like to share with the House of the story of Lionel Ross. When boy became a man, he must do the best he can to live his life and find his childhood dreams. There are words sung by Lionel Ross himself reflecting on his life as one of Australia's greatest sporting heroes. Lionel Ross was born in 1948. He was 19 when he was 19. Lionel Ross became the second Australian to become world champion boxer. After that fight, huge crowds celebrate him, and he became the first Aboriginal person to become Australian of the Year. He was king of the ring and had 12 wins by knockout and 30 wins by decision. I think we should add another win to that tally. Mr. Speaker, I move that this House place on records to that tally. Mr. Speaker, I move that I appreciate its appreciation, its contribution made our nation by Lionel Ross.
I call the youth member for Gillies. Is it Giles? Giles. I call the youth member for Giles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with the House my speech on Adam Giles. Adam Giles is an Australian politician and the first Indigenous person to become Chief Minister and Australian state or territory. Giles is a trailblazer who has broken down barriers and paved the way for Indigenous representations in the Australian politicians. Giles has been a passionate advocate for Indigenous rights, using his positions to champion the issues that affect Indigenous communities. He has worked tirelessly to address issues such as education and employees and to improve the lives of Indigenous Australians. Giles' leadership has been an inspiration to many, showing that Indigenous people can achieve success and make a meaningful impact in Australian politics and society. He has been a role model for Indigenous youth, showing them that they've been a role model for Indigenous youth, showing them they too can be leaders and make a difference in their communities. Giles' legacy will continue to inspire us all. His dedication to Indigenous rights and his achievements as politicians have left a lasting impact on Australian politics and society, and we should all strive to continue his work for all a more just and equitable Australia. So let's honour Adam Giles and his remarkable contributions to Indigenous representations and advocacy and Australian politics, and continue to work towards a brighter future for all Australians. Thank you.
I call the youth member for Chulborough. Not here. I call the youth member for Marbo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that this House place on record its appreciation of the contribution made to our state and nation by Eddie Koiki Mabo. Eddie Marbury was an Indigenous Australian man from Mare Island in the Torres Strait who was best known for returning land rights to First Nation peoples. The outstanding contribution made by Eddie Marbury is celebrated each year with an official holiday in the Torres Straits on the 3rd of June. It took 10 years for Marbury to have land rights returned to his peoples, but he kept up the challenge and worked hard. Eddie Marbury valued education as he knew that it made a difference to people's lives. At James Cook University in Townsville, the main library is named in his honour, the Eddie Cook Marbury Library. The work of Eddie Marbury had a strong impact on the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, and for this we are grateful. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Dingo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share with the House the contributions of Mr. Ernie Dingo to the Australian people. Mr. Dingo was born on the 31st July 1956 at Bulduro Station. Mr. Dingo created the first public performance of the Welcome to Country ceremony. He was awarded the General Division of the Order of Australia by Her Majesty the Queen in 1990. He received 3 American Film Industry Awards. Mr. Dingo was voted National Aborigine of the Year in 1994 and a National Living Treasure in 1997. He hosted the 2004 Dudley's Award and won one of his own for outstanding achievement in film and television. Mr. Dingo's talents as an actor, television host, reporter, and comedian has made him one of Australia's best known and most loved performers. Thank you.
I call the youth member for Betts.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share about racism in sport. Australia is home to the oldest continuing culture. We are internationally renowned for cricket, rugby, swimming, surfing, and many more. In National Rugby League, an estimate of 13% NRL players identify as Indigenous. Latrell Mitchell, Josh Adokar, Cody Walker are among the game's top players. Although we have come a long way as a nation, Indigenous players are still experiencing racial abuse and unsportsmanship-like conduct. Racism still finds a way to sneak into our sport. In all different codes of sport, racism has no place or room. Sporting is meant to be enjoyable, not about race or the way we talk. In conclusion, I leave you with this quote. Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. Thank you.
I call the youth member for Goolagong.
Thank you, Madam. Today I would like to share with the House an important Indigenous woman named Yvonne Goolagong. She is known as one of the Australian all-time greatest of women tennis. Yvonne was a very successful tennis player. She was #1 in the world in 1971 and 1976. In total, she won 92 pro tournaments. She even won Wimbledon and Samara. The first in over 60 years, she was named the Australian of the Year in 1971. Appointed as a member of the Order of the British Empire in 1972 and was a Maid of Office of the Order of Australia in 1982. Since 2005, she has run the Goolagong National Development Camp for Indigenous girls and boys. This program used tennis to promote better health, education, and employment. A seat should be named for Yvonne Goolagong because she is an important Indigenous Australia. Thank you, Mr. Adam.
I call the youth member for Harris.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I would like to acknowledge the Gimai, Wallaby, Yidinji and Yirrkala peoples as the traditional custodians and their connections to this land, sea and community. I pay respects to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all First Nations and Torres Strait peoples here today. I wish to draw the attention of the House to youth crime. This situation is at breaking point. Reports of crime are never ending in Cairns. We need to target groups as young as 8 to 18 years old. Among many reasons for these actions, boredom plays its part. Sporting clubs for some families are not affordable and transport can be difficult. Keeping youth engaged in sport to keep them involved in our community in a positive way is a priority. We need to ensure that these families of children committing these crimes are supported and encouraged to stop the rise in youth crime now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Beatson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share with the House an important role model named Arthur Beatson. Arthur Beatson played rugby league for Queensland and Australia. He is important because he was the first Indigenous Australian captain of the Kangaroos. Additionally, he played in the first ever state of origin. In 1987, he was awarded the Order of Australia Medal for service to the sport of rugby league. And in 2008, he was named one of Australia's 100 greatest players. He strongly believed in the need for young Indigenous Australians to be educated and finish school. A seat should be named after Arthur Beatson because he is a role model for Indigenous Australians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Hayman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I would like to draw the attention of the House to the issue of Indigenous health and the doctor shortages. The top 3 diseases in Indigenous health is heart disease, lung cancer, and kidney disease. The way to solve this is by exposing the health field to Indigenous health, recruit and train Indigenous doctors so we can have a better connection, and set up a support network for Indigenous and non-Indigenous doctors. Doctor shortages. According to research, by 2030, there will be a loss of 9,298 full-time GPs. The solution is remove limit on overseas doctors working in urban areas and recruiting and training all people of Australia. And in conclusion, these are the best solutions to fix these problems. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the member for Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share with the House an important Indigenous man named Charles Perkins. He has been described as the most illuminating Indigenous man in modern times. Charles Perkins was the first Aboriginal athlete to play soccer professionally when he went to the UK to play soccer. When he returned, he became the first Aboriginal Australia to graduate from university. He is famous for organising the Freedom Ride in 1965 to protest against discrimination and poor living conditions for Indigenous Australians. Charles Perkins struggles with health issues, which led to him getting a kidney transplant in 1972. After he vowed to make a difference for Indigenous Australians in 1987, he was awarded the Order of Australia's Medal for service to Aboriginals' welfare. A seat should be named for Charles Perkins because he is so much an important Indigenous person. Thank you, Speaker.
Yeah. I call the member for Gagai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share with
the House my speech on Daniel Gagawai, I don't know. Daniel Gagawai, an Indigenous NRL player and mental health advocate. Gagawai is not just a talented, but also a voice for mental health, breaking his system around and promote mental well-being. Gagawai has been open about his struggle with mental health and abstract, which is faced earlier on his career. He has sent us he platformed to share his experience and inspire others to seek hope, reminding us that it's okay to not be okay. Through his work, he mental health organization Gagawai has raised awareness about the importance of seeking support and breaking down and barriers that prevent people from doing so. His courage and vulnerability has inspired many to prioritize their mental health and well-being. In a world where mental health and serious issues are becoming increasingly prevalent, we need more advocates like Dean Gagawai who are not afraid to speak up, to share their experiences, and to help others. So let's celebrate Dan Gagawai not just for his incredible talent and on the field, but for his dedication to mental health advocacy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there anyone on the speaking list that I have not yet called? I call the youth member that wants to. Sorry, is there anyone on the speaking list I have not yet called that wants to speak? No, okay. Okay, it's time to vote. The question is that the motion moved by the Youth Shadow Minister for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. We might try that one again. Those of that opinion say aye. Those against no. Okay. I think the ayes have it. Hear, hear. Okay, youth members. Well, that was some very interesting, very interesting and insightful speeches. Well prepared and well spoken. We now have a very special guest who's joining us. It's my pleasure to call the Minister for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships, the Honourable Craig Crawford, and Member for Barron River, to come and address the 2023 Indigenous Junior Youth Parliament. Let's give him a big hear, hear.
Hear, hear. I just might do it from the clerk's microphone. And with your permission, Speaker, I've just got one of my team who might just film this from parts of the floor, so I don't want to break any protocol. I wouldn't do this in the real Parliament. Wouldn't try it. Good morning. Welcome to the Queensland Parliament. Isn't it awesome to have it here in Cairns, in my city, and a city I'm sure that many of you call home as well. So I want to acknowledge that we're meeting here today on the land of Aboriginal people. I want to pay respect to Elders past, present and emerging. A very special thing happened here this week. So as the Speaker just said, I've got one of the local seats of Parliament here, Barron River, which is out on the northern beaches. But at the same time, I'm also one of the government ministers, and I hold the portfolio of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander partnerships. So I've been leading the treaty bill, and hopefully you've heard about that because it's a pretty big deal. Now, what occurred, and I'm going to go take the story back 253 years ago. So when Captain Cook, or as Lieutenant James Cook, as he was back then, sailed up the east coast, as he came past Cairns and got a little bit further north, he crashed into the reef. And he crashed into the reef on a spot just off what's known as Cape Tribulation. That's how it got its name, because he looked over there and went, I'm going to name that Cape Tribulation because that's where things got really bad. So he got a big hole in the front of the Endeavour. They had to throw a whole heap of stuff overboard so they could float themselves off the reef. Those things that they threw overboard, they've actually since found them. They've dived down and found that spot. I think there might have been cannons and all those sorts of things. And he's linked his ship into what we now know as the Endeavour River and the town of Cooktown. And as he's come into the Endeavour River, he's had a choice of turning to the left or turning to the right. He's turned to the left and he's put his ship on the banks of what we now know as Cooktown. But significantly at the time then, that was actually neutral territory of the Guuga Yimithirr people. No particular clan had title over that. It was a significant meeting place. So he was pretty lucky that he landed on a spot that was neutral territory. Had he turned his boat the other way and landed on the northern side of the Endeavour River, he might have come up against a bit of a force that he couldn't really reckon with. Anyway, that's history. We might have been speaking a different language if that happened. So what happened is he's fixing his ship. He was there for about 48 days. Some of his crew took some turtles, some green sea turtles, because they thought these are pretty good. We're going to put them on the boat. We'll take them away, maybe to study or something. So I think there was like 12 or 16 turtles that they brought on board. And there was this one time where they invited some of the local Guuga Yimithirr people to come and have a look on board this ship, this really amazing looking thing that no one's ever seen one before. And they came on board, and when they found the turtles, they were highly offended, because it was out of season for turtles, and they took turtles without asking permission, and the local people were very upset. And they came off the boat, and they were in a real fit of rage, and they went back home, and they told all of their elders of this terrible thing that had occurred. So all these elders turned up down at the ship, and they were really enraged. They were really, really angry. And there was a bit of a blue that occurred, and it went for a few days. And there was gunfire, and there was people got hurt, and there was a whole heap of weapons, spears and hunting weapons that were confiscated off the Guuga Yimithirr people by Cook's crew. And after a few days, a moment of reconciliation occurred. Cook and a couple of his crew were walking along the banks, and that site is now known still in Cooktown as Reconciliation Rocks. And he's walking along, and he's got some of his crew, and they've got this big armload of weapons, and this little old man popped out of the scrub. He'd been nominated as to be the spokesperson from all of the clans around that area. He got nominated to go, you be the bloke to go and talk to them and negotiate some kind of truce. So this little old man come walking out of the scrub, and he had a spear with a broken tip, and he gestured the spear. And Cook recognised that that broken spear was a sign of peace, because he'd seen that out in the South Pacific before. So he knew that this old man was trying to have a conversation, and he wasn't there to hurt him. So they had this sort of broken conversation because they didn't really understand each other's language. But they both worked out that the deal was, you can keep the turtles, but we need our spears and we need our weapons back, because if we don't have them, we can't hunt, and if we can't hunt, we can't eat. So this exchange occurred, the very first reconciliation act that ever occurred that we know of in this country between whitefellas and First Nations peoples. Now, what does that mean for us here? On Monday, just gone, I had a visitor, and his name was Fred Derail, and he is one of the Guuga Yimithirr people, and Fred came down to Parliament, and he is a direct descendant of that little old man, direct descendant. He's also the son of Eric Derail, which is the first ever Aboriginal person elected to a parliament. So he's a bit of a big deal. He came down and he brought with him this. And he presented this broken tip spear to me on the banks of the Trinity Inlet just here. And I presented back to him a framed copy of the Statement of Commitment from the Queensland Government to embark on a treaty. And then on Tuesday morning, when Parliament started to sit here, this Tuesday just gone, and I was sitting in one of those seats just over there, and I had this thing stashed behind my seat, because bringing a weapon into Parliament's not really cool, right? So I'd got permission from the Speaker, I'd got past the police, and I had this spear stashed behind my seat, and I hadn't even told the Premier what I was doing. And I got up and I came up here to do a speech, and I brought the spear with me, and I gifted this. I told the story in a much shorter version of what I just before, and I presented the spear to Parliament, and I said, this is now gifted to Parliament from the Guuga Yimithirr people of Cooktown. And I sat it on the end of the table where I just picked it up from, beside the mace. Now, when you think about the significance of that, the mace recognises the Crown and the government and everything like that. What do you think this recognises? And this spear, this broken tip spear, sat beside that mace for the entire week. In fact, I'm probably the first person that's picked it up since I put it back down. So this now belongs to Parliament, and the clerk has given his assurance that it's going to go back to Brisbane, back to Parliament, and they're going to treat it with the utmost respect and probably frame it and tell the story. Because this week we debated the treaty bill. So for hundreds of years in this country, no treaty has occurred, nothing formal anyway that we know of. And there's only a few states that have started to do it, and we are one of them. So this week we put what I think is the most important bill of Parliament that we will probably see in our lifetime go through the Queensland Parliament, and we did it right here in Cairns, and that is that we're going to do a formal truth-telling inquiry on the history of Queensland, for all the frontier wars and the stolen generation, all the things that a lot of your old people talk about and probably don't like to talk about. We're going to do a formal inquiry, and we're going to publish the truth about what happened in the formation of this state that we know and how we've got to the point that we are now. And then we're going to teach it. We're going to teach it through the schools, through the media, through the newspapers, through the libraries, so that everyone understands what our joint history is. Pretty powerful. And then the other thing we're going to do is we're establishing an independent treaty body. So an independent place where traditional owners, leaders, probably your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, can step forward and negotiate a treaty outcome with the government, something that probably should have happened 100 and something, 200 and something years ago. So there you go. That was my week. Not much, hey? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Another hear for the Minister for... Hear. Okay, it's now time for the adjournment debate. So I'll start by calling the Youth Leader of the House.
I move that the House now adjourn.
I call the Youth Member for Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I am here to raise awareness of the value of small schools in our local area, particularly their principals. Each year, Babinda hosts their Harvest Festival. This event would not be possible without the support of the communities, families, and the small schools who go out of their way to participate. I've been a spectator and been absolutely amazed at the spectacle. Colourful floats, artwork, Indigenous knowledge, culture, food, entertainment, competitions, laughter, and an opportunity to learn. Small schools have low numbers and therefore the workload is distributed between a few. The time and effort that principals and their school community contribute towards the preparation and presentation of floats is commendable. This takes hours and hours of work. We have so many outstanding principals in our small school cluster. So in 2023, let's support the Babinda Harvest Festival and show our appreciation for them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Leader of the House.
Mr. Speaker, today I would like to speak of the topic of Keep Cairns Clean. When I say keep Cairns clean, what first comes to your mind? Is it cleaning up the streets to make our city look neat and tidy, or is it wiping the streets clean of dangerous crime? At Disneyland, their streets are clean as they can be. They made it so there are rubbish bins everywhere. In fact, according to Google, the average Disneyland has up to 650 bins. Now, I'm not saying that you have to go around and put 650 bins all over the place. I'm just saying to put more of them around so that people don't just chuck rubbish all over the place. And furthermore, on that subject, you can hire people to go around the streets and pick up rubbish. And not only will this make our city look better, but it will also help make more jobs for people struggling to find them. And we can even start introducing education programs to teach kids a better way of life. If we listen to what I just said, then I believe we can change this matter. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Member for Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Imagine this. The house, lights dim. The curtain rises. The actors and actresses are ready. The applause is loud. Let the show begin. But wait, where is the show happening? Is it at the CCC, Cairns Convention Centre, this magnificent facility that we are meeting in today? No. Is it at CPAC, Cairns Performing Arts Centre, the hub of the arts community in Cairns? No. This show is happening at Whopper. That's right, Whitfield, home of the performing arts. But wait, let me explain. Whopper is only at the design stage at the moment. There is a location, there are plans, and we know that in the future our students will be performing on the finest stage in Cairns. The best part is that the Whopper will not only be used by our school, but it will be a valuable community facility, something that we have been looking forward to in the suburb of Whitfield. See you at the show.
I call the Youth Member for Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share with the House my vision for Queensland. I would like to see more excursions and camps for all schools that allows them to experience Australia's Indigenous culture and tradition. I would like kids to have the opportunity to learn about country, culture, bush tucker, hunting, language, native stories, and about our traditions, plus more. I believe this would bring Indigenous kids closer to their country and culture, and it would give our non-Indigenous kids a better understanding of what our Indigenous culture is all about.
I call the Youth Member for Wiley.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I wish to speak to a very important subject that affects the lives of everyone in Queensland. It is littering. While society is more educated about the effects of polluting our wonderful state, we continue to litter. We have wonderful programs such as the Containers for Change program. Recycling correctly is often advertised, and there is education both on the internet, television, documentaries, and through print on the dangers littering has on the Queensland environment. the Great Barrier Reef in particular. If everyone in the state of Queensland plays their part either at home, at school or work or wherever they may be, it would help to make our environment healthier and safer for all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Bancroft.
Yalam Vadinaji, Nenego Go, Wodabego. This means come here, everyone, sit down, let's have a chat. Nego Balam Bodi Ungolo, this means my name is Emily Marito. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we meet here today. It is an interesting term, traditional owner. Thankfully, we all now recognize that First Nation people as the caretakers of these lands. But I ask you, who owns it? I'm from the Getaway country, and our culture is rich, always was and always will be. Our land is beautiful, full of stories and sacred sites that unfortunately we can't always access. There are farms behind padlock gates. Who are the owners of these sites? How can we be custodians of land we can't access? Why in 2023 do we still need waitlist permission to practice our culture? We feel great sadness seeing how the land is being changed. Land where family is buried. Land where there are diminished resources. Land grounded in our stories. How can I ensure our sites are preserved when apparently it's not my land at all? Don't ask us to welcome you to our country when clearly we are not always welcome there ourselves. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the member for Hunter. No. I call the member for Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to share with the House the fact that sea levels in the Torres Strait have risen 6 to 7 centimetres in the past decade. That is twice the global average, and this is a major problem for islands in the Torres Strait, with the oceans flooding their homes, gardens, and communities. They'll soon be forced to leave, and that could have some huge effects on them. 65,000 years of knowledge and connection passed down from ancestors will be lost from them and future generations. However, in 2019, a small group of 14 Torres Strait Islanders filed a complaint with the United Nations, alleging that Australia had not taken adequate steps to act on the climate crisis. In 2022, the United Nations Human Rights Committee found that the Australian government had violated the rights of Indigenous Torres Strait Islanders by failing to protect them from the effects of climate change. This is an example of how even the smallest of voices can make the biggest difference. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Ella.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to offer sincere thanks for bringing the Queensland Parliament to Cairns this week. I can only imagine that it takes a lot of planning and organisation to bring Parliament to a regional centre like Cairns. But I want you to know, on behalf of all the students who have visited this week, we really appreciate the opportunity. At school, we learn about government, and sometimes it can be hard to work out how it all works. By bringing Parliament to Cairns, we can see clearly how democracy works and the work that our elected members do for us each and every day. We are lucky that our elected member, Mr. Michael Healy, calls into our school whenever he can. He talks with our students and with our principal, Mr. Thompson. Would you believe that he has even had lunch with the preppies on one visit? He is also the best supporter of our Solid Pathways STEM program. I have been in Solid Pathways since year 4, and it is the best program. So on behalf of all the 2,000 students who will visit Parliament this week, thank you very much.
I call the youth member for Bungaree. I call the youth member for Blair.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to speak on the topic of the rising cost of living. The cost of living is affecting all people, especially Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Aboriginals and Torres Straits are struggling to put food on their table for their families. The rising cost of food has become insane. This is leading to distress in families, including families that are in our community. There are parents struggling financially to feed their children. Along with the cost of food, we face the struggle of housing, transportation, and education. The cost of housing is rapidly rising and causing a flow-on effect. This is contributing to our crime rates. Thank you for listening.
I call the youth member for Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The fragility of this place that we live in cannot be underestimated, and I'm here today to promote awareness for the annual Harvest Festival, which we hold in Babinda. This is a truly unique festival, and the entire community bands together to put on this spectacular event. One of the issues with the festivals anywhere in the world is the amount of rubbish discarded and the use of plastic. It is really important that we have solutions in place to protect our environment. The community of Babinda takes pride in keeping the township tidy and clean to avoid rubbish getting into our waterways. With help of the government combined with the power of people, I am positive that reducing the use of plastic by using alternatives, such as bamboo plates and cutlery. This is definitely one small step for us, but it would be a giant leap for our environment. We all want to be a part not only of a wonderful community event, but equally as part of solutions that we can put in place for the future. Let's be a team with a great vision and purpose around building awareness, and may it become the pride for Far North Queensland in leading ways for protection of our priceless assets.
I call the youth member for Gulpilly.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I wish to address the current issue that is impacting all parts of our wonderful state. This is the ever-increasing incidence of youth crime. It would appear that no one is immune to house invasions, belongings taken, car keys taken, houses trashed. When people no longer feel safe in their own home, something is seriously wrong. Young people stealing cars and proudly promoting their senseless acts of madness on social media is unacceptable. Whatever the answer is, I urge the government to work hard with communities to develop a more successful approach and solution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I would like to share with the House my concerns about bullying. I'm highly concerned about kids' safety in school and online. I also believe that parents are worried about their children's safety. I believe there needs to be more education about this topic, both in school and out in the community. I would like to see more anti-bullying programs in school as well as out in the community. I believe that people need to know more information about the long-term effects about bullying may have. Lastly, I believe all kids have the rights to feel safe at school and out in the community.
I call the youth member for Tambo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with the House the importance of providing more mental health programs for Indigenous youth. Indigenous youths are disproportionately affected by mental health issues due to the various factors such as intergenerational trauma, systemic discrimination and social inequality. It is crucial that we address these issues to provide Indigenous youth with the support they need to thrive. One way to do this is by investing in mental health programs that are designed for Indigenous youth. These programs can provide culturally sensitive and trauma-informed care that acknowledges the unique challenges and experiences of Indigenous youth. Through these programs, we can empower Indigenous youth to take control of their mental health and well-being, and to access the resources and support they need to overcome the challenges they face. Investing in mental health programs for Indigenous youth is not just the right thing to do, it is also a smart thing to do by providing Indigenous youth with the resources they need to thrive. We can build stronger, healthier and more resilient communities. So let's come together to support Indigenous youth and invest in the mental health programs they deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Winmar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to draw the attention of the House towards youth crime. Youth crime has been a major problem for many years and has rapidly increased, with more children having the urge to wreck people's things, stealing and physical, verbal assault, etc. Many teenagers are doing crime. Youth crime is a huge problem, especially in Indigenous youth. This makes me angry and disappointed. Although this isn't an easy problem to solve, I think these ideas will help. 1, a good education. 2, involving Indigenous communities to make decisions. 3, we could involve the mayor in problems like this. Lastly, involving elders in this. Nobody deserves to have their car stolen or their house wrecked. Especially, nobody wants to get bashed up. This is a problem for many people around the world. Hopefully we can work together to stop this disgusting behaviour.
I call the youth member for Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The news that the Olympics will be held in Brisbane in 2032 is very exciting for the whole state of Queensland. While Brisbane will be the main hub of the Olympics, there are already plans underway to see how a city like Cairns might be involved. The biggest opportunity seems to be that Cairns will make the perfect training hub for athletes from around the world. A high-performance athlete training centre has become the focus for Cairns ahead of the Olympic Games in 2032. Our climate will definitely be the biggest attraction for athletes and visitors. Did you know that there are already scouts on the local lookout to spot local children with sporting talent? Wait, in 2032 I'll be 20, so if I keep training my hardest in running, I could be in an Olympic team. Thanks for listening, but I'm off to training now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Mailman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am here to talk about pathways for First Nations people to play allied sport. First Nations children, teenagers and adults are able to play any sports on a professional level. First Nations people are starting to play sports from an early age, having culturally empowerment gives children the power in decision-making, higher level decision-making, and with a clear purpose of offering them opportunities to make choices, be responsible, and develop higher levels of motivation. As First Nations people have deep connections culturally, this connection helps with team values, attitudes, and belief about sport and competing. Playing sports for a club provides opportunities for people to develop friendships, interact with others from varying backgrounds, becomes a part of team and develop strong sense of belonging and a sense of purpose. Sports can help break down barriers, having differences of a sport, and sporting activities can make sport an ideal medium to reach individuals from every age group, cultural and social, economic backgrounds. Playing sport can improve a person's mood, concentration, stress level, depression, confidence, resilience, and their ability to control their emotions.
I call the youth member for Lingari.
Thank you, Mr. Governor. Today I'd like to share with the House my concerns about what students are bringing to school for lunches. I believe there needs to be more education about healthy eating habits. I have noticed a lot of students bring chocolates, packets of chips, soft drinks and lollies. Kids need to be making much healthier choices with the help of their families, as well as having better knowledge of good eating habits. There could be an educational program about this healthy food, like fruit, bread, meat, and vegetables. It can also discuss effects of not eating healthy, like diabetes, obesity, kidney and liver problems, and toothache. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the member for O'Shane.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I wish to bring the House's attention that the theme for this year's NAIDOC Week is elders. There are many First Nation elders from Queensland who we acknowledge for their contributions to society. Indigenous people like Eddie Marbo, Pat O'Shane, Mick Miller, Eric Darrell, and Evelyn Scott, to name but a few, were the leaders for the future generations of Indigenous people. Both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people need to cherish all elders, acknowledge that without them we would not be here and life could be very different if not for their artwork. I would urge all Queenslanders to take their time to reflect, connect, and make time with a significant elder in each of our lives this year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Sutton.
Before I begin, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, including the Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. I am here today to talk about a serious issue that has impacted many Indigenous Australians, the stolen generation. I am also here today to honour my late great-grandmother, Rita Madigan Sr., who was a Wakamin tribal ancestor of Chillago. She orbited life between two worlds, the ancient and the present, as a hunter and gatherer, sleeping under the stars, and she lived in harmony with the land. One day when she was at Chillago School, at the age of 12, a policeman came to the school and took her away unexpectedly without her mother's permission. After this incident happened, she was told not to acknowledge her mother in the streets. If she did, she would be sent away to a mission. This was during a time when the government made laws to take children away from their mothers to live with white people. She was one of many that were a part of the stolen generation. She was the last descendant from her tribe to be taken away and given to a family who lived in Chillago, the Halls. My great-grandmother was not allowed to speak her language and was made to work at an early age against her own will. My great-grandmother had no voice or was given any choices back then when she was a child, but maybe through my speech today her voice can be heard. The moral of this true story is opportunities that they did not have are the advantages that we have nowadays, such as going to school and finishing education along with being able to choose our own career. Thank you for letting me share my story with you.
I call the youth member for Sands.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I would like to address the issues of mobile phones in school. I believe that students taking mobiles into school environment can cause a number of social issues. It is a distraction for students when they should be learning, and it can easily be stolen and the result of arguments. We have too many students accessing social media, which results in inappropriate images being posted and other nasty comments being circulated. This in the past has resulted in students harming themselves and sadly some committing suicide due to the bullying online. This is just a few reasons why we need to ban mobile phones in school. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, is there anyone on the speaking list that I have not called? No? Well, it's time to vote, so let's hear some loud voting. The question is that the House do now adjourn. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Those against, no. I think the ayes have it. Students, today has been a very special Junior Indigenous Youth Parliament. It is the final for a week of parliamentary educational activities held in conjunction with the Far North Queensland regional sitting of Parliament here in Cairns. And today we had the great honour of a visit by the Governor of Queensland, Her Excellency, the Honourable Dr. Jeanette Young. We were also visited by the Minister for Seniors and Disability Services and Minister for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships, the Honourable Craig Crawford MP, who is the member for Barron River. I thank also the member for McAllister, Melissa McMahon MP, for chairing the earlier sessions of this Youth Parliament. Students, I commend this Youth Parliament on the high quality of today's debate. You have spoken confidently, conscientiously and effectively, and I believe our future is in good hands. We may well see some of you as members of Parliament in the future. Students, hear, hear, that's right. Students, in a few years' time, when you vote, you'll be electing a member to be your voice in Parliament and to vote on laws which will affect everyone. I encourage you not only to vote, but also to be personally involved in your community and to advocate for the values and causes that are important to you. Get used to having your say. There are many ways to be involved in democracy in our state, and if you see that there is a problem or something that is not working, take responsibility for it. Join an action group or start one, and if necessary, sign a petition or attend a community meeting. You might think about joining a community group or, something I hope, even a political party. One day, you may even stand for election for Parliament. Finally, students and teachers and parents, an event like this is not possible without many people going to great lengths to make it possible, and they deserve our sincere appreciation. So firstly, let's acknowledge your teachers and say thank you to them for helping, for the help they've given you in getting ready for today. Can we give them a big hear, hear? Also, let's thank our parliamentary education team, Marjorie, Rebecca, Maria, Kate and Cherie, for everything they've done to make today so successful. Another hear, hear. And lastly, but most importantly, students, congratulations on your speeches and your beautiful behaviour today. I can tell you've worked very hard to prepare yourselves for your speeches, and it has paid off. I also commend the parliamentary officers who performed their roles so diligently today, our parliamentary officers such as our Clerk of Parliament, Sergeant-at-Arms and the parliamentary attendants who also have very important roles in our democracy. I now hereby declare that this Junior Indigenous Youth Parliament is closed.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the students of the 2023 Junior Indigenous Youth Parliament, I would like to say thank you for the time you have spent with us today. Students, can we have a hear, hear for Mr. Speaker? Hear, hear.